Andrew Ripp, welcome to the podcast.
Yo, 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 yo.
What else with Corey, man? This guy can podcast like nobody can. What else with Corey, man? You will look deep inside of yourself and feel something you've never felt when he asks what else. What else with Corey, man?
This is going to be a car interview for me today, baby.
Is that the only place where you can get privacy these days, is your Ford Aerostar?
Either that or the John, which I'm open to that if you want me to sit on the throne and do this thing. How are you, Muddy? What's happening?
Let me ask you what's happening.
Okay. I see how this is going to go.
If at any moment you're kind of like, I do feel like saying something like that, you ask me and I'll do my best to reciprocate.
Okay. I'm into this. Can I fire it up with what do you think about the Grateful Dead?
I've never been a fan.
Yep.
My only touch point is a touch of gray.
Well, I'm with you. I never got it. And then did a tour where my merch guy at the end of the night would mosey out to the merch table, set the volunteers free, and one by one fold T-shirts to a live version of the Grateful Dead. Every night it was a different show. And he would just set this tone. And at the end of the night, you know, once all the patrons had gone home, he was still out there for 2 hours folding. And I would walk out to hang with him because I love him. And I'd walk into this bubble of just ease, peace, lightness. And I loved it. And I was like, what is this? And I realized the Grateful Dead was responsible for that spirit. I loved it so much. I don't even care about the music. It isn't even the music. It's what it does to the room. If you can find a way to step into that, you get it.
Did you ever get a chance to see them?
Never saw them, but I would love to. I mean, this was a year ago.
Okay. There is a gentleman by the name of Patrick Mayberry.
Yes, love him.
Loves the Dead. Loves the Dead.
Okay. I'm going to have to get into it with him.
Yeah. Big jam band guy, which that's a whole nother discussion as well.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I get it. And, you know, the modern touch on Grateful Dead is John Mayer, which obviously a genius in his craft, but understanding what he stepped into, how he stepped into it, how delicate and honorable he is to the role that he's playing in kind of not taking the place of Jerry Garcia, but definitely taking that part of the band, that void. He's filling that void in his own way while paying homage to. It's just, there's a lot of layers there, man.
The last time you and I did this, get this, September of 2020.
Jericho was still on the rise.
That is a lifetime ago, it feels like.
Yeah, it was. I don't think Jericho really, maybe it hadn't even come out yet. 2020, yeah, because it wasn't really doing its thing till 21. You were early, man.
I jumped on as a fan, and I'm going to give total transparency. I think I've said this to you before, so
Please.
Pardon me if I repeat myself. I think my introduction to Andrew Ripp was a little bit of music, but I'm watching and I'm like, why does this guy always have a Bears hat on? He's always wearing a Bears hat. I love the Chicago Bears, so I feel like I've got a kindred spirit in this moment.
100%. I mean, you're not too far from Chi-Town. Did you grow up in Indiana? Where did you grow up?
Right across the lake from Chicago in a little town called St. Joseph, Michigan. 97 minutes away from Chicago around the lake.
97 minutes from Chicago, that puts you about an hour from South Haven.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because I'd drive about 2 hours from Chicago to South Haven. That's where we would vacation growing up.
Of course you would. So you'd be, boy, and I know that you fell in love with pop radio at an early age. It was either B96 or Z95.
Yeah, it was B96, homie. That's what Mama was listening to in that Ford Aerostar minivan, cherry red, little rusted out, slide back windows. You know what I'm talking about. I was in the back seat singing at the top of my lungs to Mariah Carey because that voice hadn't totally changed yet.
But there was something about that music that got its hooks into you. Can you get your head around it now that you're older and more mature? Is it an awakening to the power of music?
You know what's funny is it really just was the way that it made me feel. As a kid, it set me free. And it wasn't the lyrics. I didn't care about the lyrics. It was just the way that the sound of the music made me feel, which is why I fell in love with pop songs, because pop songs have a simplicity to them where the hook is easily accessible. You can remember it very quickly, and you can't get it out of your head. So I think that's the thing for me when I was a kid. Like, mom would crank B96, and it was Mariah Carey. They would throw in soul as well. Like, you would hear Aretha Franklin on B96 occasionally. It wasn't like the main thing. But I do remember specifically when she would come on, because that's when I realized my love and kind of just natural gravitation towards gospel and soul, is when Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin would come on, and this little white kid in the back of a minivan was just like, it blew my mind. I'd never heard anything quite like it. To hear the way that Ray would sing without, the thing that really moved me that I remember specifically was the space in between the notes would groove without him playing more notes. He would let the space happen. Where in pop music, it was like every chance they get, they try to hit you with a hook. But Ray would lay off.
Best sounding song, in your opinion, that comes to mind right now? Just a great sounding song.
Oh, brother. Well, I mean, we're talking about Ray. And if you haven't heard him just sing "Oh Beautiful," or do you know what I'm talking about? That version of, I don't think the most modern version of that kind of feeling was when Chris Stapleton sang the national anthem at the football game. Did you hear that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I had the same reaction to that. I was like, whoa, this is accessing a thing that not very many people can access for me.
Who's mom and dad?
Yeah, so we've got Joanne Ripp. She's an angel directly from heaven. She goes to places for me that I don't even know, man. Like, I don't, if I get too deep into mom zone, I'll just start bawling and this interview will totally suck. But she has saved my life in so many ways just by taking the punches for me, being there while I'm struggling, working through daddy issues, working through divorce, even working through when she had to kind of let me go so she could work on herself. I was 14 when mama had to take some time for her. And that was really hard for me. But later in my mid 30s, went through some stuff and began to see why mom had to do what she had to do when I was 14. Cause she was in a relationship that was really, really hard for a long time, a very toxic relationship with my father for a decade and a half. And she was in it for us because, in regards to the church, divorce is not an option unless there's infidelity. There's like keys to being able to remove yourself from a relationship once committed. And I love that. But at the same time, that's been a struggle for me because I watched my mom suffer with a very difficult situation with my dad, who was not willing to change. And I can say that now because my dad is in a new place where he can see that and what, his mindset in those days did, and put my mom through. But at the same time, I'm like, she's a warrior, a rock star, an angel. Brother, I can't give you, I don't even know what to say to give you the amount of honor I have for her and love. And Pops is a different thing, man. He was hard. He was hard for me, but he taught me how to keep going when you hear no a billion times. And if he hadn't given me that skill, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. And I definitely would not be a musician still. So, very honorable things that he instilled in me and represents. However, very difficult relationship, and even is still to this day. It's a tough one, but I love him. And he's my dad, and I honor his position, and I try to talk to him as much as I can. But he and I just don't see things we just see things so differently that it's tough. You know how that is. Even if it's not your dad, it's like there's only so much depth you can have when you're not. There's a lot of this going on. There's a lot of we butt heads a lot.
Who told you could sing and you believed them?
Oh, that's a good word. I'll say it like this. This is another thing my dad gave me. He gave me so much praise for my gifts. It didn't take me much to believe I was good. Like he praised me so much for the way I would play baseball when I was a kid, that we would be out there practicing before the team was there to practice. We'd practice for 2 hours on the field before practice started, and I was 8. So I was that kid. And I think what happened during that time was, for better or worse, I really kind of gained this, like, I don't know, honor for my gift is a mature way to say it, but like it was ego. It was ego when I was a kid, because I was made to believe I was better than I actually was just based on my performance, because I was really good at it. I was great at baseball. So when I learned in the back of the minivan when B96 was cranking and I was singing along with these incredible singers, able to hit those notes, I just knew I was good. So mom was the one who turned the radio on.
Baseball was supposed to be a open door to further education. Didn't Dad push that pretty hard? Like, this will get you to college because we can't afford that.
100%. That's that Midwest blue collar. My kid is going to go to school, and there's no way I got, 40 grand to send him there or whatever it was back in the day. That's another thing. Like that's a very reasonable approach as a parent in the 90s. It's like, look, these kids have a much better shot at success if they make their way through college, and I certainly can't put them through college. So yeah, he saw my gift of being able to play baseball, and he just like, man, we worked when I was a kid, like worked. I was out there constantly. But yeah, he that was definitely the approach. That's a good word. Did you have that with your dad?
When you said daddy issues, I had a little light switch go on that at 54 years old, I still deal with. You know what? Let's go here. Let's go there. My son and I have started watching Lost together, which was one of my favorite shows of all time. And he said, Dad, what was your favorite episode? My favorite episode is called The White Rabbit. You got to pay attention to this scene between the dad and Jack, who's on the island. Dad was a surgeon, a superstar surgeon, and Jack is a little kid. He's about 11 or 12, and he stands up to the bully for his friend, and he gets his face pummeled. And the dad says in his study, I had a kid on the table today, and he had a bad heart. And after he died, I knew that I could go home and watch Carol Burnett and just go on with my life because I've got what it takes. And he says, you, Jack, you just don't have what it takes.
Whoa.
That was the language I grew up with. This is such a pivotal scene because that's the language I grew up with. And I hope you understand that is not the language you're going to grow up with. Even though you're 17, right. I would challenge you to think of a time where your mother and I ever said anything like that to you. My dad said when I told him I wanted to draw and maybe be an animator or work for Disney, he said, man, consider the military. It's not going to pan out your way. There was a piece of me that said, I'll show you.
Right.
I have in a couple of different ways, but
absolutely.
It's
wow, brother. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
It's that great scene in The Breakfast Club when Emilio Estevez kind of says, my God, have we become our parents? The generational pass down of stuff. And it's like, as a rebellious kid, that'll never be me. And then I catch myself going, oh my gosh.
Right. There are definitely things. I've had that a couple of times with my daughter. I'm like, I'm spending 80% of my time with you, correcting you, rather than just letting you spill, letting you draw, letting you get blue chalk all over your hands and walk inside and see what you do before saying, go wash your hands. You know what I mean? It's like, I get it. It's hard. It's hard. Our kids, brother, all of them are going to need counseling. They're all going to need it.
Well, get in line right behind me, and we'll see if we can
That's
get a 2
right,
for 1.
Just like us.
I'm listening to a podcast with Richard Marx, and he's talking about Lionel Richie giving him a chance. I wonder if because someone did that for him, when he got to meet you, he did the same thing of, I have to give this kid the chance that someone gave me.
And he did. I had an opportunity to meet him early on, play him a song, and he basically was like, you got it. To hear from a guy like him who had massive hits. And at the time, Richard isn't only a household name in regards to his own artistry, but he's a songwriter, man. That guy has written huge songs. And at the time I met him in the late 90s, he had just written a song called I Promise You, This I Promise You for NSYNC within months of it releasing. And it was a massive hit. I met him and he was prominent in the public eye at the moment because of that song. So I had been seeing him doing interviews with NSYNC, and then a friend of mine happened to know him. So I was like, is there any way, I wound up getting to sit down with him and play him a song. Long story short, in the meeting, he actually was like, look, I can help you. He was like, I was going to tell you to go to LA, kind of cut your teeth like I did, but I can help you here. And over the span of maybe 6 months, we wrote a couple of songs together. And what I realized in that process was it wasn't about Richard like giving me my dream, but what he was doing that I couldn't see in the moment, but can look back and see now. He gave me confidence that I had it. You know what I mean? And to not give up. Because if somebody like that looks at me and says, you've got it, well, then you do. Like he would know. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to him in a decade now, but he was responsible for a lot of my success as a singer-songwriter early on, which I didn't have any huge pop hits or anything, but it's really hard to become of any artistry, whether you're a painter or a musician or a designer or whatever. Like there's so many people trying to pierce through the market in that same artistry. So it's really difficult to kind of be heard. And for some reason, because of this kind of confidence that I got in listening to a guy like that, I was able to pierce through those no's between him and what my dad kind of taught me in the baseball scene. It's like I was a little kid, but I could throw harder than the big kids because I wouldn't take no for an answer. It was like when he would pitch to me when I was young, he didn't go easy. He threw it as hard as he could. So it's like I'm sitting here with Richard Marx and, I'm throwing him song ideas and he's telling me that they're not good enough, but you are. And it pushed me to keep going.
That feels like one of those 10,000 hours moments of it's there, but you've got to put in the time and the work and live some life.
Yeah. For him to look into my eyes after I play him a song and go, you've got it. That's not it, but you've got it. It's like, okay, that means I'm now on a quest to find the songs, who am I as an artist? What does God have to say through me?
This is not this type of podcast. I'm not going to do a gotcha moment, but let's say we do have access to Richard Marx.
Yeah.
And you guys get caught up.
I would love it.
Do you play him any of the music from the past decade? Would you choose I'd love for you to hear? What would it be?
Absolutely. There's a song called Animal that I wrote basically with my experience with fear has been prominent over the last decade and a half. Like I think we all kind of work through fear, but fear put me into panic attacks. And at the end of those panic attacks, I began to see it from a new lens. And almost like if fear is a tornado, I was in it and I was spinning with it for like a decade. And then something a friend of mine said spat me out. And I could then look at fear as if it was a tornado spinning and I was standing on solid ground. And what that friend said to me was in a conversation, I was spilling the beans about how I've been in panic attacks. I've been really struggling and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just ready to be free. And my friend looked at me and said, nope. And I was like, bro, I just spilled my guts to you. And you said, nope. He goes, you already are. And I'm out of the tornado. And I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, you're right. This is just a state of mind. I'm spinning with my feelings. I'm partnering with feelings that are telling me I should be afraid. But once I got spat out, I could see it from a new perspective and began to write songs from that perspective. And Animal's one of those. It's one of my favorite songs from back in the day that I had written and performed. So I'd probably show him that first. Go check it out and pay attention to the bridge. I found something in the bridge that has stuck with me since that moment. I went in to sing. The only part I hadn't sung was the bridge, and I had to go in and hit it because it's kind of like a higher part, and I had a cold. And I remember on the way, I almost called the producer and was like, hey, man, there's no way I'm hitting these notes, because the way I hit high notes is I push really hard. And I just felt the presence of God go, that's the point. I don't want you to have to push really hard. You have to find a way to hit these without pushing really hard. And I found a new part of my voice that day that I've held on to. It's now the main thing that I use.
Wow.
Which is this kind of mix between head voice and chest voice. It almost sounds like Sting a little bit. You know how Sting, he can hit really high notes, but it's smooth. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Now that you say that,
you don't have to put on the red light. Like Roxanne, he does it a lot. You can hear it a lot. But anyway, you'll hear in that kind of the access of that same kind of voice. And I'd never done it before.
Earlier today, I listened to Wide as the World, gave it a nice big listen, got rid of some distractions, and just took it in. Let's see if I worded this right. How much of what I think, and when I say I'm representing Christian radio, how much of what I think influences your songwriting and creating these days?
Yeah, that's a good word. I try to not let it at all. However, the people that listen to Christian radio, they don't necessarily listen to the same kind of music that they're not drawn to the same kind of music that I am on a day-to-day basis. So I have to kind of like put myself into a place on a couple of songs to make sure that the language that I'm using and the melodies that I'm using are accessible for the people that listen to Christian radio, because I know that they really respond to songs that I write from my perspective. So there's going to be 2 or 3 songs on each record that I'm really tuned into when it comes to making a song that's accessible for a Christian radio listener. Wide as the World is one of those. There's a new one called Love's Got a Way that's one of those. And then I got one that hasn't come out yet that is also for you, from me to you. And then the other ones on the album, I allow myself to say things in a way that I might not if I was planning on handing Corey a song and saying, hey, what do you think? Would your listeners be interested in this? This is more of like a place of like, any language goes, like let yourself go. There's a song called Run that I just released that's more of that. It's like, it's not so much of an empowering song as it is just kind of like a snapshot of where I was in the moment.
I love Friday mornings because that's when the new music comes out. One Republic, on the day you and I are talking, they push out a new record. Yeah. I immediately go down real quick and I see that it's 47 minutes. Andrew, how I look at the release is, what does Ryan Tedder and his gang want to say to the world within 47 minutes of time? You know, what's the new message right now that he's going to push out? I'm wondering, do you have a thematic message in the new record? Do you have a big overarching, once this bad boy comes out, like, here's what I want to say?
Absolutely. The theme of an album, I don't know, I can't speak for any other artist, but for me, it doesn't usually happen until I've allowed myself to go down the road with a few songs, and then I step back, kind of like the Fear thing. You come out of the tornado and you look at it and you go, what's happening in there? And lyrically, what I found after writing a few of these songs was there was an element of like connection. I had this visual when I read through some of the lyrics, and I had this visual. You know, when a wire is just frayed, like if you just took a wire as like a giant and just pulled it apart, there'd be frayed wires. One end of that would still be maybe plugged into the wall, but the power wouldn't be fully realized because the connection wasn't there. But when you connect it, the power then turns on the light. And I realized, like, oftentimes as believers, we stay connected to the outlet and we feel great about it. But what we don't necessarily do is find the language that connects to everyone, so then the light can fully be revealed. Connection is what I'm trying to say. There's especially in an election year, I'm like, man, everybody's got their opinions. And it's like, as believers, as Christians, like, shouldn't we be the ones that embrace even people that see it differently rather than throw up our dukes and start punching? And I felt like God was trying to say, hey, maybe you release an album that's really connection centered to just kind of like but discourage division in the midst of this year. Because I think there's been a lot of that. And it's been a bummer for me personally, because as a Christian, aren't we supposed to embrace our enemies, love them? I don't know. That's been the thing. Like, have you ever changed because somebody punched you in the face, or do you change because somebody on the other side walks up to you and gives you a hug and says, man, I see it. I understand. Why don't we have a conversation about it? Why don't we just take a walk together? agree to disagree for a minute, have a conversation. That's my perspective on the album. The loving arms of God are as wide as the world. You know, there's a verse that everybody knows in the Christian world, John 3:16, most probably famous verse in the entire Bible, is that for God so loved the world that he sent his only son. If it was only for the church, it would have been for God so loved the church that he sent his only son. He sent his son for everybody, even the people that see it differently than you. So how do we access people? How do we show the love of God to these people? We don't do it by throwing our dukes around. We don't throw our opinions at people. We see where they're at and we give them a hug anyway. So that's the idea.
So let's end with this. Let's end with a story and a thank you. 2 years ago, my family's in Charleston, South Carolina, and it's the last day of vacation, and we're downtown, and we're taking a carriage ride, and we're learning a little bit of history and a little bit of what the town is. We had a great week. We had a great week together. I have never been a fan of Andy Grammer, ever.
Yeah.
And we go past this old theater with a marquee. It's the last part of this carriage tour. And I said, Debbie, to my wife, I said, don't you like that guy? And she flipped out. I mean, flipped out. And I'm like, it's the last night of vacation. Should we go to this? Do we, I don't even know. And we hemmed and hawed all afternoon. We hemmed and hawed. I got to go walk and get the car. I call a buddy and I hem and haw to him, and he's kind of giggling at me. We go back to the hotel, and it felt like within a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
He says to me, your names are at the door. Have fun tonight. And I'm like, how did this just happen? And one word, Ripp. And dude, baby, that was one of the best performances I have seen. Wow. But watching my wife enjoy her favorite artist was a gift beyond what I can.
Man, that is awesome. I absolutely love that. Andy that guy has been Jesus to me. I can't even, I mean, you saw it. He gets up on stage and he just exudes the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
He is joy. He loves people unconditionally. He shows up in their pain. He's vulnerable with his own. I mean, he's a poet. He can sing. I'm with you, man. I'm so glad you got to experience that. And I'm sure he converted you to a fan too that night.
He totally did. I've got a playlist that I listen to on a daily basis. And there's about 4 of his songs on there. And when they hit, it takes me right back to, I don't know, maybe about 400 of us in a small room in South Carolina. And that dude threw down.
Yep. Brings it like he's at the Hollywood Bowl, dude.
So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. It was nothing, man. It was nothing.
The name of the new album and when this bad boy drops.
The Great Wide Open Wild. It comes out mid-October. I have the date, but it's not in my head. It's in my calendar. Mid-October, baby.
Okay. Fall. Leaves are falling. Atmosphere is changing. The world's about to make a decision. This is going to be the soundtrack.
Hey, buddy, I'm telling you, leaves are falling. I got a song on the album that hasn't come out yet called Long Shadows, because when the season changes up north, you see those shadows start getting long. Those leaves start falling off those trees. Oh, buddy, you just reminded me of that one. I still have to sing it, but I'm super stoked about that song.
Andrew Ripp, great to see you, and I hope to see you in person real soon down the road, okay?
God bless you, buddy. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate you. Every time I leave encouraged.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Feel free to leave a review or a rating on the episode you're listening to. And if you want to reach out and say hi, email me, whatelsewithcoreymann@gmail.com.
What Else with Corey Mann, with your host, Corey Mann. Original music and theme song by Chris Cron. Share this episode with a friend, and thanks for listening.